Welcome back to SF Comments. Tonight we will be covering the campaigns of two incredibly impressive women.
I'm an immigrant, so I moved to the United States when I was 6 years old, and I kind of, had a long path of integrating into the country, and I had a very American moment where I kind of turned into an American, and that happened to be on 9/11.
Yeah, right.
I was in New York City, and I saw it happen. So it was a really big game changer for me. It was a very big moment in my life changing event, and at that point I had a mentor who was also in the office that day, and he mentored me. That was the start of my patriotic journey. And maybe 10 years later, he told me, I should run for office.
You were a political refugee, right?
Yes.
You were 6 years old and you came here during Marcos' dictatorship. And your father was imprisoned, your great-grandfather was a former president of the Philippines.
I would insert myself into the immigration debate pretty vehemently, because I feel like I provide an outlier perspective, especially for people in Congress. There are not that many immigrants. I want a path to legal status for the
Legal
Dreamers.
status.
I think it's not fair. I think that when you're a child, this happened to me. If you're a child and you're a foreigner, you grow up here, you become an American. Chances are you become an American, just like I did.
Right, right.
And they're not the ones who committed the crime of deciding to cross the border. So I don't think that they should be punished as if they were adults.
Right.
Committing such a transgression, and they're here, and they're and if they're law-abiding and they're most likely American, I think that they should at the very least be allowed to stay here with some sort of legal status.
Right. So Christina, you're running for the assembly in California. Why are you running?
Well, I'm running for a few different reasons. Number one, I've been concerned about the growing inequality between the have and the have-nots. In 2015, there was a call to action when I was in a panel at Berkeley that I had done all this nonprofit volunteer work for the Philippines, but folks here need help,
Right.
Especially after living in a third world country and witnessing what it is like to be extremely poor,
Right.
and for the rich to continue to increase their wealth and become richer, and I'd like to help level set
Right.
things here in the Bay Area if I can.
What programs that could help alleviate the homelessness, the mental
I
illness?
think as a community, we need to get engaged and involved, number one,
Right.
right? It's not something that you could just isolate. You just don't have the homeless on the side, you witness it and you complain.
Right.
You really need to engage and start participating. What's happening? Who are the leaders? What are they doing? What didn't work?
Right.
How can we fix it? And so one of the things that I'd like to do is audit what has been
Right.
going on. The tax revenue has, been higher over the last couple of years. I mean, yes, we did have the tax reform, but we were paying high taxes. What are we doing with the money?
Right.
Why is it that we're in such a rich state and we have homeless people? That doesn't make any sense. And so
Right.
the first thing I want to do is take a look at the books and find out what's going on here,
Right.
so that we can correct it. Because Christina and I, we've worked in an industry where
Yeah.
you do more with less.
Exactly.
And so there's no excuse that if you've been increasing taxes,
Right.
for more than 8 years, and you've been able to accumulate all these funds and there are all these services, that you have homeless on the street,
Right.
right? It's
Yes.
Do you
a
feel the
crime.
same
So
way?
you really hit it right on. I was going to say this. They increased the top tax bracket, and I know it sounds high, right? It's people who make over $1 million. They charge them an extra 1% on income. Most of us don't make that kind of money, but there are people who are cashing in on their options,
Right.
and that's a big source of that's a quite a chunk of change.
Right.
So the question is, what is Governor Brown doing with
Right.
that money? That was dedicated to mental health,
Right.
and presumably to keep the people who are mentally ill off the streets. So are they not deploying that money correctly because they've been funded? So
Right.
it's astounding. So number one, what are they doing with that money?
Right.
and let's get it back and repurpose it towards
Right.
providing facilities to keep the homeless off the streets. Now, let me add to that it's different by county.
I think there are discussions right now with regards to how the cost will be covered. I think there was something that I had read that the utility companies might be allowed to increase some of their rates and have customers
And pass them to the
Yeah.
customers.
and pass it to the customers.
Wow.
Unfortunately, but there's also the conversation that a lot of the dead trees that were in these areas were not allowed to be cut down
Right.
as part of a safety measure for the utility companies. And that's why we have to
Yeah.
question it, and that's why we need more people engaged, paying attention to all these things, so that we can look to our government representatives and make them accountable
Right.
for all of this, because most of them are smart, educated, intelligent. Why
Right.
is this happening?
So what are you going to do if you become an assembly person?
Well, first of all, I'm going to again take a look more closely at how the money's being spent, not just in the county, but even
Yeah.
I'd like to collaborate with others outside of the county, outside of
Right.
San Mateo. If we can collaborate and really work as a community
Right.
to improve things, that's on my agenda, to work
Right.
together. It's no different from working within an organization, a company, cross collaborating. We need to do that,
Right.
and again, that's one of the reasons why I'm running, because I'd like to see more engagement by the people,
Right.
because all the power lies in the people's hands, and so
Right.
we need to really pull together and change things and make things happen.
Yeah.
I want to add to that. This is, this is a state issue, Christina, so maybe you can look into this. But we have a budget surplus of something like between
Billions.
6 to 9 billion. Now that's due to raised taxes, right? The first proposition that
Oh,
came,
there's the gas tax.
Well, yeah.
and they raised income taxes pretty seriously, and that was meant for education and mental health. So the question is, where is the improved education?
Right.
My son goes to public school. Where is the improvement?
Well, exactly.
And why aren't those, why is not, that same amount of money not being deployed into helping people with mental health issues?
Yeah, exactly. My son attends public school too, and I volunteered at the public schools, and I see what some of the gaps are.
Right.
And it's sad, because we're ranked, depending on where you look or data that you see, we're ranked number 41 or 44 in the
46,
nation.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
and we live in the heart of Silicon Valley. Why is this happening? Why do we have to import talent?
Right.
We should be investing in our own talent here,
Right.
right? And get a return on that investment,
Right.
rather than having to import the talent. Not that I'm against importing talent, but we need to make an investment in our local talent
Right,
first.
right.
Yeah.
Well, we have a shortage of talent probably, throughout this entire area. Everybody could.
Yes, but they've used that argument for 20 years, and if 20 years, if you were looking forward, you would have started to make that investment 20 years ago.
Right, right.
In the youth who would be the leaders
The
of
next
tomorrow,
generation.
right?
Right, right.
So we need to start thinking that way. We can't just be short-sighted. We need to have this long-term thought process in terms of strategy and how we're going to hit these goals and be held accountable for goals.
Right.
That's one of the things I don't hear. I don't hear about the goals and having our leaders accountable for the goals. And being in business, you do have goals and milestones, and you're held accountable for
Right.
that. And our leaders should be accountable as well.
Right.
I wouldn't begrudge somebody their success, but just as long as it's fair.
Right.
And so I mean, there's a reason why you are having these incredible mega billionaires now, right? Which is, when you put out a product, it can be deployed across billions and billions of people. So that's the nature of the technology industry and the nature of some industries today. And so you can strike it rich, and I wouldn't begrudge them that. I just wonder, I would, as a congresswoman, call into question the fairness of some of these exchanges that these technology companies have with the public, because the kind of the transaction now has flipped.
Right.
Instead of a consumer just purchasing something, and here's some money, $5 or whatever, and buy. That's the end of the transaction. I go my way, you go yours. Now there's a permanent tie with the consumer. The consumer gets something free, and the company gets something potentially limitless from the
Right,
consumer, which
right.
is their information. We don't know, what the end of that is. And I'm very concerned about this.
Right, definitely.
Right? You asked me what the first 3 things I would do that are probably more pressing, but over time I would like to focus on this issue and come up with something that would be a fair way of protecting the consumer's privacy, and kind of making sure that the equation is
They're
fair.
selling our data, basically.
They are selling our data, and they're getting it from us for free. And every day the value of that data goes up.
Right.
And the problem is that it compromises our safety.
Dad, why is it that some of, the employees of Amazon are on public assistance?
Yeah, right.
And so hopefully we can all change that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, with regards to this inequality, I'm hoping to do things that can close the gap on
Right.
on that end.
Right.
Because it is, and it's not just with the tech companies; it's across the board.
Right.
I mean, I've witnessed people who, are working blue collar or service jobs, who, in my opinion, sometimes are taken advantage of.
Right.
Right? Someone who's extremely wealthy hiring them to do housework, and not paying them
Yeah.
the minimum wage
Right.
and getting away with it. And I
Right.
don't think that's right. It's not fair. I've had people who've come in and helped, but I've always said, I'm going to pay them more than the minimum wage because this is hard work and they should get
Right.
paid that amount of money. And I'm hoping that we can help reverse that with, Cristina and I and others who are looking out for the masses can help change the way that people think about being part of the community, and and a sense of responsibility to also give back. If you're doing well and others aren't doing as well, share, share in ways that you can, and not keep everything for yourself. I mean, I've been I'm very active with a number of nonprofits where I volunteer my time.
Right.
And, people would ask and say, why are you doing this if you're not getting paid? It's because I want to give back. If I can
Right.
help, I'll help. And so,
Right.
especially in the Filipino community.
Right.
And I'm hoping that, there are more than 300 or 400 nonprofit communities here helping Filipinos in the
Right.
Philippines
or even locally.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping we can help grow that, kind of take that sense of community that Filipinos have
Right.
and expand it, to the mainstream so that
Right.
we're all helping each other.
Right.
I don't know, we do have something quite special in the Filipino community, the way we
Right.
have the ability to build such a cohesive community.
Exactly. Exactly.
I wonder if other cultures have what we have.
I believe so.
We should be working together and not
Right.
against each other, because there has been, unfortunately in the public sphere, it's difficult to express one's opinion if it doesn't necessarily mirror with someone else's. And I think it would be great if everyone would just be more open-minded. That would be one. And two, get more engagement with the community. People, like you said, people are moving out. But if we were taking care of each other more, maybe that wouldn't happen. We would find solutions to the problems and not just have the problems continue to grow, which basically encourage people to leave.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So, and then, obviously changes to education and finding other opportunities, especially on the employment. I really want to draw attention to areas where we could be more competitive.
Right.
And create more of a balance on the economic side for safety,
Yeah.
right? Education.
Right.
So education is tied to competitiveness. Competitiveness, helps out on the economic front. But also, number one, you want to feel safe, right?
Right.
You want to know that you have a home to live in, you have food to eat, you have a job. So
Right.
that is encompassed in safety, right? And being secure.
I think at the federal level, one thing that we do owe the entire nation, because it is federal level, is just manage the funds, the finances of the government, more responsibly.
Right.
At California really needs to have their fiscal a splash of fiscal responsibility.
Right.
I don't think I think that really is, that's like one of the most pressing issues, in my opinion, that needs to be fixed in California. But on a national level, if you have to print money because you can't afford to fund the government budget, it causes inflation.
Right.
And one of the reasons California is having the cost of living problem that it is having is because of inflation.
Right.
It's because the supply of money has been increased, and California, and a lot of that money ended up in California, a disproportionate amount. That's one of the reasons you are seeing the problems today. And maybe it's because more money likes to find its way to California. Well, that is not a maybe, that is definitely the case, because we have such a productive economy. So it's not just being able to stimulate the economy and fix the economy and create more jobs. You have to provide kind of the infrastructure, monetary as well, to make that economy grow at a pace that is palatable to the everyday person.
Right. I was reading this article about student loans. There's trillions of dollars in student loans. Bailed out the big banks with trillions and trillions of dollars. Why won't the federal government bail out the American people, which they've never done before? There's some studies I've read that, in fact, it'll be good for the economy for the U.S. to just forgive the student loans.
Well, I definitely think it's a serious issue. I mean, the cost of education has gone up, and it's extremely expensive to send your child to a university or a college here. And I think that there's been an increase in students looking abroad who can get probably an equal education, diverse education, and pay less. But graduating with that burden, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 or more, some have $200,000 in loan when they graduate, they're not in an advantage, right, when they graduate. So I think it does make sense. And I also think that they need to revisit the cost of those loans, because the interest rate at banks are in the single digits, and sometimes these student loans are in the double digits.
Yeah,
they're in 8%,
10%.
Why would the government want to charge more for its citizens than they would a commercial bank would charge on a loan? It doesn't make any sense.
Well,
so
the banks, remember, were like -0 for years and years. The Federal Reserve was just basically just giving out money,
but
and
then
the bank bailout.
Once again, the taxpayers, basically your middle class citizens, are paying more to have their kids educated in their own country. I think we need to look at that and change it.
What do you think? That would be a federal issue.
Yes.
Not every, and here's the other thing that's one of the root problems, is that not everybody gets an education that they can get a return on, right? So some people are signing away on the loans
and can get a job
and subscribing to the idea that, okay, if they go to a college, they're going to be able to get a higher paying job.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. You should revisit that. Revisit how much you're charging for the cost of the loan. And to Christina's point, it's true. A college education is not going to guarantee you that job, and that's why we also need to think. We really need to think about where are the opportunities in education. Not everyone is geared towards having a college education. There are people on the vocational side. They might, thrive on the vocational field. I mean, you've got all these electric cars or hybrids. You need people to service those, right? So there are lots of things that are happening on the technology front, on the business front, that doesn't necessarily warrant a college education.
This is a huge problem. This the weight of this $1 trillion. But
Exactly.
I think that you can also, if the government takes on $1 trillion of additional debt, I don't know if that is ultimately a debt that our children are going to have to bear anyway. So I like the idea of mitigation, interest rate mitigation, and also work paths to loan forgiveness. Like, for example, as an incentive to hiring somebody, maybe the company could subsidize the student loan, and then there could be maybe a government incentive to incentivize that company to go that path, right? Instead of paying somebody a signing bonus, and so that the person has $40,000 and can go do what they want. It'll be okay. In lieu of a signing bonus, here's a smaller bonus, and and we're going to be paying down your loan. We're going to be, So I think there are many paths like that. Also, there are government jobs where you could take where they actually forgive your loan as well. So, that model has been implemented in the public sector. So I think that expanding that to the private sector would be. That's also a great path to get these kids looking for jobs,
Agree with Christina in terms of looking at other ways to help on the forgiveness side. And I was thinking the same thing in terms of companies offering signing bonuses. But if there's an incentive for the companies to help subsidize the cost of that loan, but number one, I'd actually try to revisit lowering that interest rates first. I mean, I don't know if charging that much on the loan is actually, was a rational decision. I don't know how it came about, but I would actually.
Congress did that. The
Right.
Congress sets the rates, which is, I was flabbergasted when I read that.
Yeah, but it doesn't. Yeah, but it doesn't make sense that for a regular loan you'd pay less, but then for your education you pay more.
Yeah.
Right,
Exactly.
and it's not a guarantee.
And there are no jobs out there.
Right,
in
exactly.
that field.
There's not a guarantee, so it really needs to be revisited and
Right.
basically have a new plan
Right,
on that
right.
end. But I definitely agree, because you shouldn't have to graduate with that much debt.
Right.
Again, I think it warrants some visiting in terms of, why are they charging so much more? Because when I was growing up, my family and other middle class families could afford to pay for 2-3 kids in a Catholic school, just your neighboring Catholic school, right? It was $200 tuition or something along those lines. Now it's like $20,000 a student.
Yeah.
I mean, who can afford to send 2 or 3 kids if they went that route, right?
Thank you for joining us. See you again next time. Good night.